this week, I just finished a huge chunk of information. Basically, an encyclopedic entry on introversion for the Psych Today website. So I'm like about as up to date on the topic as you could imagine. Tell me what audience you're doing this for and what your motivation is.
Yeah. So, and I'm gonna walk. It's so nice to be outside. So, I found this author who I really liked her work, and I felt like I didn't have enough of a platform to write a book on my own, and so I pitched it to her to co-author it, and she said yes. And so
wait, let's go back a step. You are in general a writer, and you found this topic because...
Oh yeah, let me back up. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have a Psychology Today blog. I've done a TEDx talk. I've gotten quotes placed in a lot of different places. There was an APA contest for the best essay on the link between psychoanalysis and jazz, and I won first prize. So I've been doing a lot of writing, and I've been nurturing doing this book about introverted extroverts. And it's going to be a sort of self-help book. It's not going to be as highbrow as Susan Cain's Quiet. It's kind of like trying to be a little bit of that, but more along the lines of, if you are an introverted extrovert, how can you make sure you take better care of yourself? So for example, the title of the book is called Recharge: Striking the Balance Between Our Introverted and Extroverted Selves.
Okay, that sounds like it sounds like there's room for that kind of conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's that there's a lot of interest in the business world and leadership issues, regarding introversion and extroversion. And I think word's kind of gotten out now that most people are more ambivert than extreme introvert or extrovert. So
that's right. Yeah, and actually the pitch that so here's where we're at, just so you get a sense. So we're almost finished with the proposal. We wrote a sample chapter. We wrote a proposal. We have an agent, and we're pitching it as, while there is some out there on this, there's not been much or anything written by therapists themselves. And we know, like you said, a lot has been done in the business and leadership world, but not has been done within the psychology or therapy world.
So it's intended for a general audience, not for therapists, right?
Right, a general audience. Yep.
And so the writer you're co-authoring with is someone who has expertise in writing or on the topic, or what? So
she wrote a book called It's Not Always Depression, and it was about to put it blunt, it was about like getting back to your core emotions, and I read it and I thought it was brilliantly done, because it was very clear but also very intelligent.
Who is the writer, may I ask?
What's her name?
Yeah.
Her name is Hillary Jacobs Hendel. So she came out with this book in 2018.
Vaguely familiar, yeah.
And the reason I picked her is because I liked her writing style. I thought it was very accessible, but I also can tell that she was very intelligent. Like, she went to Wesleyan. She was a dentist before she went into therapy. She's got a very eclectic background, and I thought we would hit it off as partners. And so she likes writing in a way that takes difficult concepts and makes them understandable and practical for a lay audience. And it turns out she came to writing on a fluke. She wrote an opinion piece for the New York Times that got published, and an agent approached her about writing a book.
Oh, okay.
So she doesn't consider herself a writer. She considers herself a therapist who happened to fall into writing.
Right. And you have an agent, and has your hi, Clark.
Hey. Hi.
And your agent has been giving you advice on how to develop the proposal, or?
Yeah, we so it's funny. We started right at the beginning of the quarantine. We were supposed to meet with the agent in New York City. I was so excited. This was like, coming out of a movie experience, and then we're like, everything has been remote. And he's walked us through like what we needed. He from the very start, he really pushed us to say, wait a minute, tell us why there's an audience for this.
Yeah.
And tell us also like what's special about this. So, because, rather than like everybody's going to say they're introverted extroverts, right? But the point is like, how do you make this very specific? And that's what we've really tried to do is really, we're trying to make it like almost like the version of Quiet for those who are introverted extroverts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I could tell you just on the basis of the reaction to things on the website on Psychology Today that anything about introversion more than extroversion gets a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And because these people feel like they're so overlooked all the time. And, maybe they are. I mean, we know that extroverts, are out there. And here's a funny thing. So the data show that there are about as many introverts as extroverts.
I know. It's so funny.
But if you ask people, they would say, oh my God, the world is just full of extroverts. And, it's just they take up all the oxygen,
Yeah.
So you have this misperception.
And that's one of the things we're also writing about too, is that a lot of people who are introverted extroverts like myself, we presume we're extroverts because that's the better thing to be. And so I think it sort of skews the numbers in terms of what people actually are. But yeah, I found that the introverted piece has been a really popular one. And so we're trying to figure out how to, well, we're almost there. We actually are about a week away from finishing our proposal, and we're ready to hand it in.
Uh-huh. Who's your agent?
I know him as Richard, and that's
hey,
that's how name droppy I am.
Hey, it's a good start.
Yeah, let me look. I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's not critical.
I got it. Hold on, I'll find it for you.
While you're doing that, do you know if there's this? I'm just curious. Do introverts read more than extroverts, or does anyone know that? Yeah. They do. Okay.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they're known to read more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another thing I wanted to throw to you, Hara. So we were working on a sample chapter, and one of the things that we were trying to do with it is it seems to me that it's a big balancing act, making sure that you get, the concepts or what you're trying to teach people in a self-help book, but also people are moved by narrative. And so, one of the things that we've been trying to do is really go between a little narrative, a little conceptual kind of meaning, explaining. So kind of whereas fiction is all show but don't tell, self-help is this interesting combination of show and tell.
Yeah, that's true. So what is your question about how much narrative to include in a proposal? Or
well, yeah, we're basically going back and forth, in this one chapter. We set it out with what we're trying to do in the chapter with a paragraph, and then it goes into a little narrative section, and then the narrative section after a few paragraphs goes to explain the concept of what we're trying to get at, and then back into another narrative, right? And it goes in and out. We're finding that that's been a good structure.
in your, this is the sample chapter, not in your chapter outline, I take it.
Right. Yeah. The chapter outline is much more like what you'd expect, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of anything else I could ask you. I wasn't expecting to have the time to ask you questions. I was expecting to be listening.
So, yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. I mean, that's the way I construct articles, where I'm using narrative very heavily. And, in a book, I mean, the one thing you want to be cautious about in a book is that, there are several ways to use narrative in a book. Look, just as there are several ways to use narrative in an article, you can, for each you can base each chapter or each concept.
Right.
Presumably, each chapter deals with roughly one basic concept and moves the story forward.
Yeah.
But you don't want to overdo the narrative.
Right.
And you may want just one really good, really in-depth narrative per chapter. Because otherwise you can be a brilliant writer, and narratives have a way of captivating people. But if you're just doing a series of narratives, you can really lose the reader and lose the idea. So that's just one thing to be cautious about.
Yeah. I'm trying to, I think maybe what we'll try and save that is we're trying to get little snippet of narrative and key points or key conceptual stuff that people take away practically.
Sure, but one thing you could do, I mean, this would be my recommendation actually, would be, and I don't know which one of you is the keeper of the narratives and the interviewer who gets the narratives, or whether they come from your clinical experience, but it's really good to have one story in depth, and then to start with a chunk of that, and then deal with conceptual information that moves your story forward, your exposition forward, and then go back to a little bit more narrative from the same story.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing. Yeah, that's what we've been doing. So what we've done is we've done in an interesting way. So we started with my narrative of a kind of example, and it actually uses a pop culture reference so that it's intriguing. It uses a song. And we then use that to kind of launch into like what it is we're talking about in terms of like, it's basically our chapter is about how most people who are ambiverts have a sense of shame about that because they don't really know what the concept is and that it's okay. And so we go into talking about like what shame is in connected to that. And then we weave into two little snippets of case examples from our clinical work. Again, highlighting the same thing. And again, we come back to my narrative at some other point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my only recommendation to you would be don't overdo the shame part, because I'm not sure. I'm just from the reading that I've done, and as I said, I just came through this very intensive research. I'm not sure that shame is applicable to so many people. I think people are a little confused. I mean, and then a lot of people are coming at this through personality tests. Companies get personality tests. And anyone who's doing anything with a kind of a Jungian framework kind of knows that most people are a little bit of both with something dominating. They may not know how to balance, but so I'm not sure how much shame applies to it, but I haven't encountered that, in fact. Um, confusion maybe, but not so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Confusion more than shame.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's helpful.
So yeah, and it's so funny because I just literally finished a huge chunk on this topic. So
Yeah, that is pretty synchronicity, right? That's
yeah, right.
Yeah, no, well, thanks for the tips and the feedback. I'll definitely use it.
Good.
When is your books? When is this? What's the timeline of all of this?
Yeah.
I got to do some work this week, and we're just fine-tuning the sample chapter. We have the rest of the proposal, so if all goes well, we're hoping to finish it by this Friday, and then we're going to leave it a few days and give it to some friends to look at, and then based on that, we're going to just hand it in. Yeah, we got around 30-40 pages, and we're good to go.
That's not bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to let it marinate for a few days and then look at it again.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very fine-tooth comb with it for the past 2 months. So we've been like, we really feel good about the proposal part of it. We're just really refining the sample chapter to make sure it's concise and very focused and has the best of our examples. And we're going back and we're cutting things. We're just really. Robert Frost said a good poem should be hard and dry. You want to get as much of the excess out of it. So we're trying to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that's a good thing to do. And as I said, no matter how many times you've gone over it, it's always worth putting it away for a few days and cutting the lawn and doing,
exactly.
anything but looking at the manuscript and then going back to it with fresh eyes and after a good night's sleep and saying, okay, I'm looking at this as a new person.
Yeah.
And, how does this look to me and how does this sound to me? So,
no, that's great. Yeah, I'm going to keep on trying to do that. Yeah.
Well, good luck.
Thank you. I'll keep you posted.
Please do. So is this your first book or?
Yeah, this would be my first book, which I'm excited for. And that was the other reason why I wanted to pick this co-author, because she actually already has experience with the book, so she's really good at keeping me on track. And so it's really almost like a good mentorship experience for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you guys use an editor, or is that done? What's the timeline when an editor comes into play usually?
Well, usually, so what will happen? In this case, he and his co-author are developing a proposal which will be sent to a publishing. His agent will send it to various editors at various publishing houses, people that he's cultivated, people he thinks would have a special interest in the topic. And let's just take it along simply and say, okay, a couple of editors are interested. They will want to talk to Michael and or his co-author. They'll want to know how the work is being done, how they're dividing up the work. They want to know, because when you have co-authors, you want to know that there's a stability of the partnership and that you're going to actually get your book and it's not going to be lost to incompatibility.
Yeah.
Incompatibility between, the co-authors. And so they're going to want to know about that arrangement and who does what. And then they're going to focus on who this is for and tailoring it for. So it's just going to be the acquisitions editor who's going to be looking at the proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say an acquisitions editor makes the decision. That decision, by the way, will be made in a conference with other people at the publishing house. And usually a salesperson, usually someone higher up on the food chain, and possibly a publicist and a couple of other editors. And if the company is broken up into groups, a couple of representatives from that group, and jointly they'll throw out questions, and there will be a joint decision. And out of that meeting, there may come more questions. The editor may really want to acquire the book, but other people may have questions. So the editor may go back to the agent and authors and say, well, tell me more about this, or can you do it more this way, or have some other suggestions, questions. Yeah. And there may be some back and forth, but you have to always remember that unless the editor is really high up and has their own imprint, that it's going to be a group decision, and you may have to answer to a whole bunch of other questions, including marketing ones, before the book is acquired. Now, that acquiring editor may or may not do any work on the book. Probably he or she will look over globally, comprehensively look over the book, not get into great detail, but that depends. And perhaps give instruction, may, without even consulting anyone else, go back to the writer and say, hey, I gave this a fast read and it feels like it veers off here, or this needs more depth, or can you bring in more voices or more expertise or something? And may go back to the writer for that, before then giving it to probably a line editor to work through carefully. So that's how the ball game works.
Wow.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to finishing it up, to seeing if there's interest.
I think the timing is right now. Isn't this like a hot topic for right now, Hara?
The thing that I've discovered is that there is this perennial interest in introverts, and they just jump at all the information. And I think there are two things. I think one, they're feeling overlooked in a culture that's got a lot of loudmouths and that rewards extroverts particularly. This isn't Japan. This isn't,
right,
a different culture. I mean, in Israel, extroverts here wouldn't even they'd register as introverts in Israel, which is like the most extroverted country. In your face. I think many of us have experienced that. It's just normal for that culture. So culture is different. But I mean, I feel that in the US, introverts really feel overlooked and jump at any articles about them. But I also think that they're actually looking for clues they're really looking at the nature of the information for navigating offices and work. And
yeah.
I mean, that's my sense. And Michael and Debbie, I mean, as therapists, is this not your experience that they're looking for?
Well, so that's the interesting thing. That's what we're going to be writing about. A lot of the people that I've worked with in therapy, when I've connected the introvert part for them, or that they're an introverted extrovert, it has helped tremendously with their anxiety and depression. And it's not common for therapists to really zoom in on that. So that's the point of the book of we're trying to say is like, yes, you're right. This is so important for leadership and all this kind of stuff, but it actually could turbocharge your therapy or turbocharge the work that you're doing in terms of really connecting to yourself. I think part of it is that people don't talk about it in that way as much as they probably could. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. I think within the culture, what's written about is Adam Grant and Daniel Pink are all writing about how it connects to how good a worker you are, how good a salesperson you are, and, you know, how much of a leader you really are. And I think that's great. So we're trying to kind of fit a little bit of a slightly related angle of this is also about your personal growth and freedom from anxiety, depression, and other things that you're suffering from can be helped through this lens.
Right. I mean, because there is that fact that introverts are more prone to depression and those, you know, internalizing ways of thinking and experiencing the world. So
Right.
rumination and all that leads to. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much. This was so helpful and so much fun. I'm so glad that I was able to sneak away from my 2-year-old for a few minutes to get you. But I'm going to head back and make sure that he's doing all right. So I'll keep you guys posted. And when you have another one, I'll come on and I'll give you an update.
Stay well.
Great.
You too. Bye. Bye, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Clark.
Ciao.
Hi.
Hello. Sorry, my dog ran into her friends that she used to play with every day, 5 days a week, and she hadn't seen them since the shutdown, so I couldn't pull them away. They were so happy. They make these weird noises that they never otherwise make. That's something like, if they're trying to speak like a human or something. It's very funny.
How's your writing coming, Clark?
Yes, I was just about to ask.
Oh, well, Hara, I sent you something this morning, which was this little, totally unrelated to my book, which is this little op-ed that I've been working on for a week or two that I think is almost ready to submit to people. It's about why conservatives should wear masks. So it's written from the perspective of if you're conservative, you should support saving others. That's why the true conservatives don't dodge the draft. And what could be more courageous than wearing a mask to help others? And then it goes through a little bit about that. So yeah, it's interesting. There are different iterations of it. Earlier on, my liberal friends thought the draft analogy was bad because they think the draft is bad. So I had to clarify in my own mind. And then in the piece, okay, well, this piece is not written for liberals who are already largely complying with social distancing, or at least want to comply, right? But that it's written for conservatives who are sometimes not complying with that, and to try to put it in the sense of why this is actually a patriotic thing to do, and then even courageous in the sense of standing up to authority, which would be courageous standing up to Donald Trump, because he might be wrong. So we'll see. I mean, I'm going to run it by some of my conservative friends today. I'm actually unclear in my own mind if I really mean for it. After what Joel said last night, I was thinking about it in the middle of the night. I thought, wait, did I write this to actually make fun of conservatives or to persuade conservatives? And I'm not totally sure. So I'm going to send it off to some conservative friends and see what they...
Can you share it here?
Yeah, I think, let me send...
Oh, sorry, Hara. I didn't...
How do I do...
Yeah, I happen to be one of those liberals, Clark, who actually believes in the draft.
well, I mean, I do too, but there are... So liberal is probably the wrong term. What's the right term?
I mean, I believe preferably in no war. I mean, you know,
right.
That would be my preference. But if we are going to have armed forces, I do believe in the draft because I think the burden should be shared equally. And what we have now is really, we're sending off for a large proportion of the population, service is a way out, and a way out of the small towns, small experiences they've had. I'm not talking about the fourth generation Army general or, the fourth generation of service to the Marines, but people for whom there's not this future pulling them forward. And so service becomes a way out and a way up and exposure to things and the promise of education. And therefore they're at risk. Their backgrounds maybe have put them possibly at increased risk of PTSD and other kinds of negative reactions to horrible experiences or challenging experiences. So I think we're shifting the burden disproportionately onto these people and increasing the division within our society as a result in an almost physiologic way. I think it's bad. It's not a conversation my liberal friends are comfortable with at all. They think I'm nuts.
Well, I grew up as a military brat. My dad was fought in World War II, was actively involved in the invasion of Sicily.
Wow.
Did amphibious warfare, and then he was at the Brooklyn Naval Yard, a counselor, oddly enough, at the Naval Academy, which is he's not a very warm person to me, but people would come up to him at the Naval Academy Officers Club in tears, thanking him for how wonderful.
Wow.
Well, I think lowered expectations, right? So I think people in the Navy must be so cold, but a tiny bit of warmth must make him seem wonderful. And then he was, he most famously was the principal author for the Turkey Report, which is this classified, still portions of it are classified, that explains what American nuclear strategy is for where you place nuclear weapons. So how many are in the air, how many are in missile silos, how many are in submarines, and how many, this is sort of an open secret now, how many are in underwater fixed facilities off the coast of Australia and Turkey and places like that. It was actually a question in the last presidential debate. My sister and I nearly fell off our seats that Trump was asked about the Turkey Report. Yeah, so I grew up with this, and my dad wanted me to go to ROTC, and it was one of the best negotiations I ever did, because he really wanted me to go to Harvard, because he's born in 1918, so like for his generation on the East Coast, what could be a better school? And I really wanted to go to Stanford. But it was a little ambivalent, wasn't quite sure. So I get into Stanford right away, like April 1st. They sort of indicated they would admit me way earlier. Harvard defers me from October. Little Renaissance story about what happened there, I later found out. And then all the way April 15th, I finally get in at the regular date. And I go to my dad and I said, well, Dad, and he's super opinionated about everything. I said, Dad, what should I do?
I connected the introvert part for them.
Yes. I didn't realize you were still there. Oh my God, your picture disappeared. And so now I no longer see you. I got to reset my settings. Yeah, what's the introvert part?
Oh no, he's gone. He's gone.
Oh, okay. I thought he said something there. That's so funny. Must be like eating from my computer.
No, so I heard it.
Oh, you heard it too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my dad says, well, Clark, it's such a big decision. There's such good schools. I don't want to tell you what to do. It's completely up to you.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, well, it was very strict. Years later, so 4 years later, I won a Marshall Scholarship. I have to show you sometime. He wrote me a 6-page single-spaced letter with a cost-benefit analysis of whether it was worth deferring law school to take a Marshall Scholarship.
That touches me really deeply, because people don't invest in a 6-page letter unless there's a big part of their heart in it.
Oh, he was very, very well-intentioned. And he included within it, his advice was not to take it, but he included within it this hysterical line where he said, I want you to know that although I think you would be better off going to law school right away, we will support you no matter what. And when we die, our land and our homes are all yours. And I thought, I think we just own a small vacation home and a largely suburban tract home. I don't feel like we have, thousands of serfs.
The empire. Yeah,
an empire or something. So what I did in the negotiation was I found out that Harvard had they now readmitted them, but Harvard kicked ROTC off in the 60s. So if I went to Harvard, I couldn't do ROTC. But if I went
really
to
deeply
Stanford,
because people don't.
Sorry, guys, that's me doing that. I'm so sorry.
oh, that's how you did it. Oh, you're able to replay portions of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I told my dad, well, I think I'm going to go to Harvard. By the way, it turned out to be, in some ways, a mistake. No lasting damage. But having gone to both schools, I'd been better off going to Stanford.
So wait, so you went to Harvard undergrad?
Went to Harvard undergrad, and I tell my dad in August when I'm doing the enrollment, I said, Dad, I just realized I'm doing my courses, and I called them. I didn't see it there. It looks like I can't get into, oh, no, it was slightly before that, because I had bad eyesight, so my dad had to get me a waiver that I could still be in ROTC, so he gets that. And at that point, he had put down that I was going to Stanford, and then I switched it. And then he found out that I actually couldn't go to Harvard and be an ROTC, but he said that was okay. So it was all my plot from the very beginning was to get out of Harvard. Yeah, so I grew up with that. I will say the interesting thing is I think there's unfairness because there are all these levels of unfairness in not having a draft. Number one, it's unfair to the people who go and take risks that they don't really understand what they are. I mean, we have a friend from Renaissance. Her son went to an elite-ish college. His name I can't remember. Could even have been Princeton, but I don't think that's it. And then he enlisted, not going through even officer training school. So he enlisted and went to Afghanistan. And he did develop, I would say mild to moderate PTSD. From what I can observe, it could be more severe than that. So I think people don't know what the risks are. But second, and you see this in stuff that Obama wrote about the military during the Afghan war and the other wars. If you don't have a military background, the tendency is to wildly defer to the military establishment. And the military establishment only presents you with a limited range of options. That fiasco that almost got us into a war with Iran was because the military was doing what it usually does with the president, and they present them with one completely ridiculous option. Super extreme. Let's kill the leader of the Iranian military, which a normal president would be like, okay, well, we're not doing that. And the other extreme option is, let's do nothing. And they're going to do, they're not. And then you get a single option in the middle without explaining any other choices. And then people just go for the middle. The big exception was President Kennedy rejected the advice of every single member of the war cabinet not to go to war with Cuba. And do you know the punchlines to the story, which is it's now been revealed that the military didn't think this, but the Cubans had been given launch authority by the Russians. So had the United States invaded Cuba, they probably would actually have launched nuclear missiles from Cuba.
Oh yeah, and this is very well understood in the world of psychology because it's exhibit A of groupthink. Original decision. I mean, it's just been written about and written about and written about, and what the consequences would have been. So yeah,
it's pretty horrible. But so I think if people, and so it's to me, it's not an insignificant part of the story that Kennedy was actually in the military.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Or he was able to question and think about it independently in a way that other people. I mean, he was very entitled in other ways. I don't want to exaggerate. So I think that's a problem. I think the other problem is when we don't know anyone. I think most of my friends don't know anyone who is in the military.
Right.
But I know tons of people who are in the military. And so I'm very reluctant, like when they were talking about, war with Korea or war with Iran, I know what that actually means. Whereas I think other people, including Trump, right? He's willing to do all these militaristic things, but he has no connection with the reality.
I know. And the interesting thing to me has been that the people restraining him are the generals who do know what war is like. Right. It isn't just a shoot 'em up video. Real people die and there are real costs. And, there are real sacrifices, and it's not easy for anyone. And the remarkable thing was that we were rooting for the generals against our president. I mean, that's a big turnaround for
Oh,
most.
it's completely crazy, right? Because it's completely, that was my instinct in it. So I should say my father, I remember he would come home from work, usually didn't talk about anything. I didn't know a lot about the details of his work. But I remember him throughout my childhood saying how angry it was. Like it would come up several times a year that MacArthur, so my father was also in Korea, and MacArthur was going to launch nuclear weapons against China and had, what is this called? Had launch authority. So he had actual launch authority. So if he issued the order, the missiles would actually be launched. He didn't, it would happen that way. But instead, and he consulted with his officers in an extended way, and most of them said, like, launch. But instead, he decided to contact Truman, and Truman fired him just for, my father's telling the story just for asking, right? And so my father thought, like, well, we should have used nuclear weapons there. And then years later, during the Vietnam War, the Joint Chiefs of Staff recommended the use of nuclear weapons several different times during the war. But I didn't know that. I just thought my father was a crazy person advocating for the use of nuclear weapons. And then when I found it out, I'm like, wow, my father is not a crazy person. My father is part of a crazy institution. Yeah, that is the backdrop. I mean, so when you think about it, we would have died potentially 3 times: the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, had the military been listened to. And so now we are in this weird situation where there's no one who can really check the military. Right. Thankfully, I mean, I do think Biden is likely to win, although, you know.
I hope, from your lips.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we hope so, right?
Right.
I think he's perfect, because what I think is great about Biden, don't quote me on this, is that, you quote me on this, he's not very smart, but he knows he's not very smart. Isn't that interesting? It's like he doesn't, so with his national security people, he doesn't
get good people around him.
Right. Yeah, great people. He doesn't like think he's smarter than they are. That's the problem with Trump. He thinks he's somehow smarter about
everything,
including injecting yourself with hydro.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Hey, Clark, can we see your article?
Yes. I was just trying to call it up. Let me see if I can share it with you. Oh, if you give me share authority.
Okay, I'll do it. You should have it, but let me see.
Okay.
You have a little green button that says share?
Yes, let's see if that's going to work. Zoom meeting. We're going to do share screen. I'll do it that way. Oh, host disabled attendee screen sharing, it says. But let me see how I can do this. See if you can enable it somehow.
Okay.
Or I can put it, well, putting it in the chat would be weird. Oh, I know what I can do.
Hold
I can create a link on Dropbox and put that in the chat conceivably.
Hold on, I'm doing it right now.
You right now?
You can. Now you can.
Now I can? All right, let's see
Yep.
what we can do here.
Can you just open it on your desktop and share desktop?
Yeah, I can just open it on, I think it'll just let me share screen. There we go. It, having taught online, I hopefully.
Here we go.
Okay.
There we go. There you can see it.
It's exciting.
So now we have a couple of moments of quiet.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to do this Oxford style where I would have to read my tutorials out loud.
I mean, I like to sit with something and read it. I don't like to be pressured.
Oh yeah, that's why I sent it to you. Yeah, I sent it to you this morning when I thought.
Oh, I didn't get to see it before.
Yeah, no worries. I didn't think you would, because I also didn't want you to feel like you had to read it.
Oh, I will. I'd be happy to read it, but I just didn't see it.
There was a request from Facebook Live to see the article.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, that's fantastic.
There are comments happening that you aren't seeing, so I wanted to.
Okay.
I can also share with, I'll put in the chat a link to it.
Okay,
so
perfect.
That way people can download the entire.
So you were talking a lot about why you were, what you were saying about this. So it might be a good idea for people to be able to read it now on their screens.
No question. Yeah.
And then next week you can come back and show us what you have to say, Hara, maybe.
Sure. Sure, that's always good.
because then everybody will
Yeah,
have.
we all
the
have
second.
that. Yeah, we will all have read it. So yeah,
Somewhere here. Oh, I see. Resume share. All right. I have to figure out if I can also see the chat and put it in there now. Yes, there we go. Chat. Type here. Okay, there we go. So now I'm putting the link to it in the chat.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then resume share. Yeah, so you can see that. It's interesting, Hara, because you said something which I think about a lot, although not as often as I should, perhaps, or as I would like to, which is what is the intent in doing anything? And in writing, like what is
Anybody? Doesn't everybody have to think about that? I mean, you just do it for.
Oh, I think most people don't. I think most people, it's so interesting. I think most people don't think about what their intent is. And I think some people have so for example, with truth, right? So like I have a co-author on a piece, Shauna Shapiro, who wrote The Path of.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
You know Shauna? Anyway, so Shauna and I wrote a book. We wrote a long article on mindful judging, which was supposed to be mindfulness for judges. And we've expanded it to judging generally. We all are judging people, judging if something's true or not. And she has a piece in there that she wrote, and then I edited, on how intent is so important to mindfulness, and quotes John Kabat-Zinn. But separately, Shauna had said to me once, what do you think of radical honesty? I'm thinking about practicing radical honesty. And I said, oh, well, to be radically honest, I think that's total bullshit. And I think it's also a grease pole to hell. Like, you don't want radical honesty.
No.
It's not even really truthfulness, because like every thought you have is not really true. Like if I said everything I thought, a lot of it would be completely mistaken, right? So it's thinking about what is the intent in saying something. So it's interesting, but with writing, with this piece and thinking about Joel, it's like, well, is the purpose of writing something, sometimes it's just to express myself, so radical honesty, but sometimes it's, I feel very scared about COVID for myself and for others. I think people don't really understand the risks that are involved, and also feel reluctant to wear masks, because for some people, I'm very lucky, it's not uncomfortable. For me, I mean, I swim a lot, so like my breathing is easily, I used to scuba a lot, so my breathing is easily, so it doesn't feel bad to me at all. I've trained using a snorkel where you cover it with masking tape.
Oh wow.
A little slit so that you increase your VO2.
So
the mask is no problem. But I get that for other people, it's a terrible problem. And some people, it induces this anxiety. What's that called?
Oh yeah.
Panic attack. So initially it's a little bit uncomfortable. Then people focus on their breathing becomes shallower, it becomes worse. So I get that it's hard, but I really, my intent is I want people not to make themselves and others sick. Like it's such a, and so the point of the piece is like, this is no big sacrifice compared to the draft. Like we ask people to do things for the sake of a collective all the time. And we do things for other people all the time. Many of us who are not psychopathic or narcissistic or both, all the time. And compared to the draft, this is such a small sacrifice that most of us can make. So that was kind of the motivation for the piece.
So this morning, with two things I want to say. One, about motivation. I'm going to invoke Joel again. Most people are clueless to their own motivation most of the time and provide rationales for, rationalizations for whatever their motivation is. But that aside, I was going to say that this morning, when I sort of woke up late, and I like to dip into the morning shows on a Sunday morning, and I turned on CNN, and just long enough to hear Dana Bash ask some governor, I think. I was in the kitchen, I wasn't in the TV room, and some governor about opening things up, and the implication in his answer was people didn't need masks, and it's a right of people to congregate. in let's say houses of worship and whatever. And yeah, you know, no one wants to take anyone's rights away. I just don't want you to take my right to live away. You know, I mean, and that didn't seem to enter into the conversation. I mean, we all have rights, and we all by agreement. We all accept limitations on them in certain circumstances, and it just I had to turn the TV off because it was infuriating me. I wanted to know wait a minute, there's a public good here that gets obscured in my rights. You know, it's my liberty, and don't infringe my liberty. And I just wondered why someone wasn't discussing the fact that your liberty, this is not the ordinary circumstance. Highly infectious bugs that kill without asking you and informing you is not your everyday circumstance. And so we have to adjust and make some different compromise temporarily with our rights, hopefully temporarily. And so we give up the freedom of congregating because that will spread it to other people. So I just thought, well, wait a minute, why should your right to do whatever the hell you please, that's going to infringe on my right to inhale and exhale, quite literally.
You know, it's interesting. I just thought of this. The image came to me as you were talking about the congregating, that it reminds me of World War II in London, when people had to go underground and turn off all the lights in order to prevent the Germans from being able to more precisely bomb the buildings. So if
it's my right to keep my lights on.
Right. If people had done that, it would have cost other people. And, you know, and if you look at the philosophy behind libertarianism, John Stuart Mill said, my right to liberty, to move my hand ends where it hits your nose. Oh, I'm getting this butchered.
No, that was, wait, was that him or was that, I'm not sure who the source was on that.
Yeah, I think it was John Stuart Mill, but I could be wrong. But yeah, you know, it's interesting. It's just hard to understand, you know, motivations. I think there's a sense of, there's intentions, right? So there's our conscious, what is it our values are, right? It's like, I would like to, but then there's motivations, which I think of as what actually explains our behavior, not because we want it, right? But because it's just something that motivates us. So I had this procedure done recently on Tuesday. I had an endoscopy, and I said, well, I want conscious sedation because I don't want to have a long recovery period, and I have a super high tolerance for pain. I did a colonoscopy with no anesthesia whatsoever. So the doctor beautifully says, it was a person who specialized. He's like 75 years old, did a million of it. It's not like I was the only person to do it. And he says, oh yeah, I'll do exactly that. Well, I'm looking as the drip starts to go in, and I said, when will it take? And that's the last thing I remember. And then I woke up some amorphous amount of time later in a different room, and I thought, wow, that was completely not what I wanted.
Yeah, right.
How did that happen, right? And so I don't think my intention was to surrender my power and authority to someone else, but I was motivated by a kind of deference to authority and a kind of implicit bias that he fit the image of someone I should trust, that he was at Stanford, it was a beautiful building, he'd been at
He'd already done this a couple of thousand times.
Yeah, so some of it was rational.
Way around. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so motivations, I think we don't really know, right? I mean, all of the research on
Is your book going to be on motivation, Clark?
Yeah, so part of it, so the first chapter is, what do you all want? What do you all want? What are the different parts of yourself? What do you want? And the next part, and I may use a version of what you were talking about, Hara, which is, what do they all want, right? So what they all want would be, you think you're negotiating with an acquisitions editor, but you're not really. You're negotiating with all these people behind the scenes. So you need to take account of what they want. And for both what you all want and what for they all want, there are your conscious intentions, but then there are your motivations. And by that, I mean simply what motivates your behavior in a mechanical way, what predicts your behavior. So anchoring is a perfect example. If I say to somebody, so my usual charge for a 1-hour keynote that's not customized is $10,000 in San Francisco, $15,000 on the West Coast, $25,000 on the East Coast. I'm picking that number in order to anchor people's expectations. And if their original budget was, well, we should negotiate for $2,000 to $3,000, without thinking about it, they're going to immediately go to the limit of their budget, right? But that's not because that's really their intent. It's that they're motivated by this anchoring effect that I've used. So that's a key part to it, and trying to understand how we can better stick to our conscious intents as opposed to these sort of motivations that may draw us away from what we really want.
So it's funny, I was really thinking about this motivation thing this morning because early on, my beau called, and he's in North Carolina. I haven't seen him in months, of course, now. And I mentioned that I was cleaning, I mean, really cleaning, like cleaning, Bona, doing my kitchen floor and my kitchen and pantry. And, you know, this is heavy duty stuff. And I was doing it, and, you know, and I can't remember how the conversation got to that. And, you know, he said, yeah, you know, he does it all the time, and he does. And I said, please, you're my inspiration. But what I also meant by being my inspiration was, damn, you know, I want you to see how gorgeously clean my house is, you know, when you're here. So it's, you know, there's that other element of the motivation, not just, oh, yeah, I want to have a nice, sparkling house. It's no, my motivation is to have you think good of me as someone who does these things. So not that there's anything to be ashamed of. All our motivations are mixed, but I was conscious of how a part of usual motivational gestalt was something that normally doesn't enter into our consciousness. No, it's like, no, I want to be seen as, you know, the lady who keeps the pristine house. And yeah.
Right. So I'm hearing two quite different ways of thinking about this. One would be, my motivation is love. So
absolutely. And that's true.
Make you feel comfortable in the environment. So I love things super clean, but I hate actually cleaning. So left to my devices, it gets pretty messy. But I've realized over the last couple of days, oh, wow, Jeffrey really is uncomfortable with how messy it is. So I thought, I'm going to clean up. And as I was doing it, I was doing it out of a sense of love, not out of a sense of, oh, I want to avoid criticism,
right?
But out of a sense of love. But then there's this other level that I heard you saying, which is at this level of identity, right? I want to be this kind of person, or be seen as this kind of person.
Right. Yes. Yes.
It's different, you know, which is interesting. Identity is so motivating, but it's also so potentially corrupting as well, right?
I'm not sure it's corrupting, but I mean, you know, by what standard do we call it corrupting? I mean,
well, not in your instance,
No, but I mean, for anybody, if the end goal is good, I mean, I think this is where we confuse people on motivation. Our motivations are normally this really, you know, interesting, subterranean and very conscious mix of things. And I was aware today of of the subterranean elements that were in it, aside from the love, aside from my desire to have a really sparkling house just because I want to have that for myself too. But I also wanted it for the identity of, you know, his view of me, and, you know, and all the love, and the fact that he does it, and that inspires me to do this chore that I would happily delegate to anyone, anytime, you know.
Yeah, except during the pandemic, I think.
Yeah, right.
I've been paying our housekeeper, but not having her come by. Yeah. Well, so the reason why I said corrupting is sometimes people have an image. Here's the example that I think of all the time about what does it mean to negotiate, or like we were talking on the call last night about what does it mean to sue people, right? And so someone can have a sense of, nice people or nice women shouldn't ask for a raise, right? And in fact, I was talking to my therapist about something, and he said, well, you know, my roommate, he has a boarder, but I call him his roommate. He's somebody who rents a room in his house, and he hadn't gotten a raise in 6 years. He was coaching him on how to ask for a raise for these 6 years, and he was having to lend money to his roommate all the time, and he wasn't paying the rent because the roommate just didn't want to ask for a raise. He said, so finally what I did was I just called up his boss and negotiated a raise for him.
Oh my God.
I just thought, wow, that is so funny.
That has to go in your book.
I love that. Oh my God.
That's
amazing. So that's where identity is.
Oh my gosh.
It kept him in the way of, taking care of himself.
Wow. I don't know how I would feel if someone took, that is hilarious to think about, that he took it upon himself and called the boss to get a raise. Wow.